Thanks Karthik for a wonderful stage and making it possible for us to join here and share knowledge between ourselves. So as we start our discussions on security in motion, DevOps as a business enabler, I think all of us today are more into automation and one-touch deployments where we are doing rapid releases. So I believe that with speed, there's always a risk in terms of focusing on security. So I think we will use this stage to probably understand from you on how do we balance security versus speed and looking at good resilience, right? So with that said, I think we will start off with the first sort of question that we wanted to put in the forum. So how can security be integrated into pipelines without disrupting a developer's sort of workflow, right? So if Mr. Saravanakumar sir, if you can probably.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for organizers. You guys kept the security post-lunch session so that we try to be as an enabler, not a distractors of your good lunch. So to start with that, I like to take a step back and respond more on an organic way. So the developers should do the codings and parallelly with the vulnerability need to be addressed. A step back where I can provide an organic way responses. So the developers do the programmings based on the requirements comes from the business side. So the business side where we call as a business requirement document where many of them were gone through and work and modify based on the business. It's more on a dynamically they change the requirements. So especially I'm coming from the fintech background and our business also stays more dynamic and the requirements keeps changing whenever regulatory level requirements or customers level, partners level requirements keep changing on the lending ways. So the main focus where we need to do on more on the BRD level where I want a security level discussion should happen. So it's not just a business and the technology team alone decide what kind of end result they're looking for, the solution they look for. So in the starting point itself where we bring the security discussion along with the BRD. So the clear cut of what kind of an end result of the solution they are going to deliver will be at least the 50% we can able to oversee. And from information security and a security perspective, we can give the guidelines of OWASP's guidelines are already there framed out. So that can be more inherited with the BRD documents. So most of the things where the coders, when they start doing it practice, the visibility and the awareness part we need to bring it. It's not the tool dependency, tool only we integrate and depend on the tool. What are all the things it's establish the vulnerability report and then remediate, which is more on the reactive. So we have to think on how we can address that in a proactive way. So then the tool part where we can integrate our SaaS kind of a solution, we also integrate in our organization with the CI/CD pipeline and the GitHubs, so that the module where without completing identify the vulnerabilities, without remediating it cannot go to the next level module. So that kind of a technology level we can able to bring, but the thought process of how we have to address the vulnerability at the coder level also should start from the BRD level. That is my thought process.
Thanks, Mr. Saravanakumar, sir. So I think if I would like to see if Senthil can probably add on some thoughts on how do we add more value to this conversation.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Narayan. Before entering into the technical part, how I see is the crux of the question itself is how to implement security without disturbing the regular flow. So that's the crux of this question. So let me start with how we can approach before implementing any technical thing. So how can we strategically design this solution? So that's why I'm just trying to put my insights there. I hope many of us, went on drive with our fathers in two-wheelers, right? So I hope most of the people might have taken their parents or fathers, right, in the bike, right? So let me share my experience on that, okay? So what happens is whenever I drive, my father sits in the back. Whenever he presses my left shoulder, I should turn left, okay? So if I want to turn right, he will press my right shoulder. Okay, I will understand, okay, I have to right. Then he say, okay, hey, switch on the indicator. He'll say, put horn. And if he press both the shoulders, then I should decide, okay, I have to reduce the speed, okay, because I might be crossing more than 50, 60 kilometers, right? Then if the bus is coming, even 200 meters far, he will ask me, hey, put the brake, hey, slow down, horn, everything, right? So we might have faced all these things. So what he tries is actually the security, right? Safety. So he ensures that we have to safely travel. That's what he's ensuring. That's absolutely good, not the bad thing. That we definitely want that. So as a driver, so my goal is to reach the destination at the right point of time, right? So that's my goal. But what happens is if father sits and guides me on the security here and there every time, then that's irritate me and that slows down my delivery, right? The same principle if you apply into that developer story, right? So if I am a developer, if somebody sits me and says, hey, stop here, go that side, go this side. So if he does that job, definitely that will impact my pipeline, right? That definitely will slow down. So that is why there is a hesitation in the developer side that they are hesitant to take that security, so they will try to avoid. So if my father is not there, I will take the wrong direction, I will go in the opposite direction, I will go in the platform, I will try the bike, right? So all these things we will do. So because my goal is just to reach the destination. So similarly, developer has their own goal. They have to deliver at the exact time. They should not supposed to delay. But as a family, my father expects that everyone is safe. Right? So similarly, the security team in the organization thinks that, okay, everybody in the organization, the entire organization should be safe. But at the same time, the security team, DevOps team, they have the responsibility to ensure that it is not disturbing their workflow, right? So prepare the security plan, ensure that it is not impacting their day-to-day work, and that will help them to deliver quicker. And also, how it adds to the business, right? So basically, this entire discussion is about how DevSecOps is enabling the business, right? So when we have the right methodology without disturbing the workflow, the developer can deliver their code on time with high level of security. That will improve the business time to market, right? And also, that gives a lot of space for developers to innovate a lot, right? So if the environment, the pipeline is not safe, they will scared to do some innovation. They will not put a lot of effort on trying new things, right? So if they ensure that we have the proper guardrails, they can freely innovate a lot, and that will enable the business. Yeah, thank you.
So I think that innovation part was something that's key for us to take in. So if probably Mr. Narayanan can add some light into how shift-left security helps developers better integrate security into their workflows.
Sure, yeah. So probably I would touch on 5 different factors here when it comes to implementing security without disrupting the developer's workflow. To call it first, probably it would be shifting your security left, wherein scanning your code at the very early stage of your development life cycle, like you have tools like check marks, basically, which can be integrated into your IDE, wherein it prevents developers from even pushing the changes into the repo before even they push the changes into the repo. So that's one thing. Second, I would say optimizing your security pipeline, bringing in your SAS and DAS at the very early stages of your development pipeline, the DevOps pipeline. At the same time, it should not disrupt the development as well as the functional testing phase as well. So probably we can think about having it as a parallel pipeline which runs incrementally rather than running it on the whole source code, which will help us, bring down the scan time as well as, it's going to give you a continuous feedback at early stages of your DevSecOps pipeline. So that's the second one probably. Third one, I would say, consistently having the policy consistency, across all the environments. As you can see, the policy as a code is something that brings in the policy across the infrastructure. Like you have some, rules that you have in your organization that requires to be followed across the organization for all the infrastructures. So having a policy as a code really helps there. And fourth, probably having your infrastructure as well as your container images hardened. Like I can see, one of the tools that I've seen in the the booth, which was Clear Start, if I'm not wrong, Clean Start. So I think they provide basically kind of a hardened images, which is kind of really good to have something in our organization, basically we have some separate team who takes care of, scanning through the, the openly available images and then having it certified so that that can be used across. So having such tools basically helps us having a solid hardened images. And finally, something that is really important, I would say, to have this as a, to have it without disrupting the developer's workflow. At the same time, having an efficiency here is basically the training and culture. This is something that, enabling the developer to understand why he has to do it, training them what is required for him to do and why he has to do that, what is the benefit basically that we're going to get out of it. And at the same time, make it a kind of a shared responsibility for everyone and instead of being it a blocker. Thank you.
So thanks, Narayanan. So I think tools, policies, and training and all that is something that's very imperative, yeah. So like if Mr. Chris sir can probably add some thoughts to this.
Thanks. Good afternoon. Most of them are already been covered. Just to add some more perspectives to this question, right? This is one of the core challenges most of the organizations are facing today. When we actually thinking about a kind of solutions to this problem statement, we should actually been understanding, why is this even exist, right? So, at least to me, I see that, not just in India or in our generation, right? We actually started out with, the development. So, where the speed was the major, the KPI or the goal, how quickly you can actually get the product into the market, right? So now, at least I just want to generalize, though, those days are gone now. Speed is of course important, but more than the speed, the regulations and, the stability and compliance, right? It's taken place now. So it is where these questions comes up. It's where the developer, of let's say 10, 20 years of experience, they see that, any security requirements is considered as a kind of block, considered as a kind of, it's like a slowing down my development. Otherwise, if you don't come to me with these requirements, I could deliver even 50% faster, right? So, but now we are in an age wherein, like, almost like everybody is talking about, security and, the privacy and compliance, regulation, and all these things, right? It's where, though it looks like a repeated statements, though the shift left is unavoidable. Security by design, privacy by design, resiliency by design, and compliance by design, right, is a need of the hour. The minute we, as any projects, right, when they consider the functional requirements and the business requirements, right, I don't think even a security requirements is no more a choice now. And security requirements has to be from the day one, right, so that it doesn't appear as if it's a bolt-on security. They say that, right? It's there actually. The development doesn't say that, no, I can only do code this much, and this is actually more than that, because anything from the business they consider as a default, right? Similarly, even the security and compliance requirements has to be handled and managed from the day one, right? So that's the one cultural shift that we can have. It is no more a choice. It is as good as the functional requirement, right? So that aspect that I wanted to share in, that's most critical.
Thank you, sir. So I think by design, like, we'll have to inculcate security. So that's a good take for us. So I think we'll move on to the next question, where, like, we would have to look at approaches on how do we manage risk when it comes to open source dependencies, wherein, like, we put in all of it in our projects, right? So any light that can be thrown on this?
This is again a very classic question in almost like every forum, because in the modern software development, we can't think of removing an open source community and just thinking about a closed door software development alone, right? So a simple case, like, if you look at the LLMs, right, most of them are open source today. You can't just ignore them and move on to this, right? So I think we would need to as leaders, we would need to consider a holistic approach to handle this problem. Probably I can talk about my own case, like in our organization, we are considering a larger program just to address this, right? I'll just talk about a plan. More likely, any organization, any industry, any region will be able to connect to this problem statement, right? So we actually wanted to, have SBOM, the software bill of materials at the core. Then there is a module which actually which handles the compliance portion of it, right? There is another module which actually takes about handles the vulnerability aspects of the the product. There is another module which actually kind of handles the patching cadence, right? So mostly it is about the governance, right? And what kind of automation systems that we have, what kind of the SOC infrastructures that you have. For example, to address to the same question, open source thing, right? We need to have a very strong threat intel platform in the behind, right? So so one side you need to have, these are all my vendors, these are all the products, and these are all the versions that I consume in my organization today. On one side, other side, how is this deployed in my environment? Let's say there is a vulnerability, just the minute I get to know that there's a, let's say, zero-day vulnerability, or there is a vulnerability disclosed, will I be able to get the impact on in my organization because of there is a vulnerability found in this, right? I should have this, this inventory in place, right? And both sides. One is the software bill of materials, other side the deployment, right? So this particular, let's say version X.Y.Z of this particular product of this vendor, right? I have like 1,240 deployments, right? So it actually gets me how critical is this, right? Number one. And so again, back to this, you need to have a threat intel, automated threat intels, for example, right? There are a lot of open source, the MISP and a lot of things are there. Like, you need to have one which suits to your organization thing, so which actually automatically updates, right? Your the core infrastructure that I'm talking about, saying that, okay, is there any vulnerabilities found? Is there any breach happened because of this, right? Is there any exposure to this, right? I think it's not a pointed solution that I could think of, rather more of a holistic, right? Just to wrap up, open source you cannot avoid, but anything which is not managed, right, it's going to be a serious problem. So managed in the sense like, for example, how active is the community, for instance? Open source is fine, but if the community is not active, then it's going to be a serious problem, right? So you also need to have sunset policies for this. You have an open source product. Now, do you know, like, when are you going to planning to retire? Maybe that because of the new version comes in, or if there is no updates for last 3 years, I'm going to, retire this. So I think we would need to have a larger policy in place. It's a larger question, but actually, I think every other organization is.
Yeah. So thanks, Chris. I think you covered most of it. So I think, Bharat, if you can add some thoughts to it.
I think Mr. Krishnamurthy has covered most of the point. Sorry about my voice, I have a sore throat. So I think I want to go back to the basics and see, to answer myself right. So whether we need open source for our product development, yes, definitely, yes. And from a CISO standpoint or from a cyber standpoint, would you agree? Would you recommend? Yes and no, depends on the, the environment and how mature we are in terms of governance and stuff like that. And it's just like, I'm just telling an example, right? I'm a coach and I have to select my team member for a cricket team member, right? You won't select the member as if they're coming regularly for the practice or, just based on some parameters you got to select. There are certain parameters you got to keep in, right? You got to see the track records, you got to see, how punctual, they got to see how they're performing and stuff like that, right? Based on that, same thing with open source, right? Open source, basic parameters you got to follow, I mean, understand threat intel and all, very important. But I would say first we need to have an inventory on what open source tools we have in organization. That's very important. Most of the organizations may not even know what inventory, what kind of open source we use within the organization. So the awareness of your estate, entire estate needs to be there. If you don't have an awareness on your entire estate, what tools you use, both in endpoint, both in servers, you miss the critical point. First, you need to have an inventory of all this open source. From there, you got to start. You keep looking out for security issues or vulnerabilities on a periodic basis. So you have scanners available in the market. You got to see know the security vulnerabilities and weaknesses on those tools. The third point is keep uploading or updating the patches or versions related to open source. And you have to select the trusted open source. You get a lot of open source from the market. Of course, with the advancement in AI, you get a lot of open source in the market. You got to select the trusted open source from the market. The last one is embedding, the source code, the CICD pipelines and stuff like that. So that everything goes inside, goes to the trusted channel. So these are the 5 parameters. And more than everything, from a governance standpoint, I would recommend we should have a strong policy, open source policy in every organization, with a committee being formed. So for example, in my organization, we have a committee, open source committee, wherein every open source come inside. That gets vetted by legal, gets vetted by security, that again goes to CTO for his approval. So this kind of governance model we have created. So it's just like any user cannot go and install the open source, right? We got to come through this channel. Plus, in addition to that, we have created a technology lab where any open source needs to be embedded in the application, needs to be tested. It's a secluded lab, so that gets tested inside the lab. And once, because it's not like one open source you got to test, right? You got to test a couple of open source and find the best one. So test the open source in the lab, and finally, whichever is compatible goes inside. Again, after testing done by security team. That's this channel we have created. And you ought to be very clear on the licensing part and stuff like that. So it's an entire governance part, what Mr. Krishnamurthy said. I just wanted to add. Yeah.
Thanks, Bharat. So I think it was a fair point to have a governance body who looks after all this, right? So,
just one point to add, but with Bharat is like, we should definitely have the approved list of open source packages. And if possible, we can have our own repository as well, like Nexus kind of. So that way, developers can, without any fear, they can just get the download and then use it. So it is really good to have the approved list of open source softwares.
Sure, I think traceability is something that's very key. So if probably, Karthik, can you add some thoughts to this?
Sure. So, see, I'm from a bank. I'm heading the enterprise architecture in a bank. See, most of the softwares that are being used in the bank can be, if you see, most of it's COTS, or in the recent days, it's all SaaS, right? Now there are things that we also develop, which also has this kind of. So when we say open source, as my fellow panelists are saying, we have to inventorize. But to inventorize, there are challenges, right? So for example, if it's your own software, so you can actually run a SCA tool or whatever to identify what all dependencies are there in your software. But then if it is a third-party software, which has, like say, Log4j vulnerability, like how we used to actually get excited about open source governance.
Transitive dependencies.
So the Log4j vulnerability was a trigger point, right? So even if you want to understand whether a third-party software like a COTS or a SaaS has this, there are challenges, right? Now, when the regulators, like in our industry, they kicked in this kind of a OSS kind of a thing. Couple of years back, I formed a team under me, so they used to manually do this, right? Because no third-party vendor today declares this is my composition, right? You might know it for your own software, your developers might give that, but then for third parties, you don't. So we used to manually collect some of these things, and we used to run those. So there are 3-4 different risks with open source, right? One is vulnerability. The other is your EOL, EOS support, right? And then you also have this kind of license problems. Like you can run into legal risk when you are actually composing the software through this, right? So we used to assess all that, and then we used to manually do. But now you have few more opportunity to do this. For example, you have curation policies you can put in your Artifactory, for example, right? You can actually do a lot of this SEA scans and all those things now. And now, because of AI and all those different things, we have some of the tools which can do SEA remediation as well. If you have certain vulnerabilities, you can basically put some, a different version of the library or whatever, it will automatically remedy. So these are there, and then still our surface area is growing, like my fellow panelists said. Now we have an open source LLM. We are talking about containers and all those different things, which also have this. So we are talking about open source, which is there embedded within our softwares, the runtime dependencies as well, which also can have these kind of open source exposure, right? So this is a catch-up game that we are normally doing. The provenance, the software provenance, the kind of declarations that even open source communities do, on their software that these are my vulnerabilities. There's of course there's a CVE repository, right? But whether they provide a declaration on this is my vulnerability and this is my advisory to avoid this vulnerability, we are not yet there, right? Regulators are now mandating, I mean we'll talk about that further, but then regulators are now mandating, they have found certain ways to do this. So yeah, I mean we are catching up. Yeah.
Thanks, Karthik. So if Vinoth, do you want to quickly add some point to this?
Yeah, thank you. So most of the points are covered by everyone, like the SBOM, continuous feedback, other stuff. So I just want to share what we are doing in our company. It's just an experimental thing. So basically we are doing some kind of automated scoring system for every package, like based on the maintenance, update, issues, GitHub stars, something like that. So during the deployment, if the score below goes below a certain threshold, deployment gets stopped. So then we go into it and find out what's the issue, and then we will fix that issue. And the second thing is that we cannot entirely stop using the open source dependencies. But what we can do is that we can see whether we can create it in-house, like right now we have AI, Cursor and other code editors that can do the coding faster. So in the open source dependencies libraries, maybe we need a certain part of the thing that needs to be executed in application. So we don't need the entire thing need to be deployed. So in that case, if you think it can be done by coding by yourself, then yeah, you can do it. So that's my point.
Thanks, Vinoth. So I think thanks to both of you to bring up the software component analysis into picture. Yeah. So I think the next point is something that's quite a few people would like to know about this. So how do regulatory audits affect the pace and structure of the whole DevOps setup? So this is something that's like quite a burning question for many people, right?
I'll take it up. Since I'm coming from the fintech, so we are adapt to be regulators are our gods, and what are all the frameworks they make, that is a Bible for us. So as per the recent regulatory frameworks released by the SEBI and as well as the RBI Master Direction a couple of years before, so they clearly mentioned the not only the direction, the way, so the way how we have to manage the control, especially on the DevOps side, we have to start maintaining all the SBOM of all the applications. So they want to see the complete life cycle of the applications, and as well as how we are managing that one, including the licensing part, everything, even if you're using the open source in your stack. So regulatories are now, it's one step down, and they start seeing the control level, not at the framework level, at the advisories or governance. So we have to be start providing the data on a regular basis. So that is a mindset which is complete shift left from the regulatory side, which is one way good that it's enabled the security to adapt earlier, and as well as prepare our audit preparations programs.
Thanks, sir. So I think that software bill of materials that we have to manage is something that's very key. Like we'll definitely take that into account. So Karthik, like, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah. So you know that recently MeitY has come up with this kind of a white paper on how do we do supply chain governance. Right? Now, a lot of the regulatory bodies like RBI, SEBI, everybody has notified the same thing. SEBI has been earlier, but RBI is now. And recently, again, MeitY has revised, and then they have gone up further up. So what MeitY has told us, we have to maintain the supply chain inventory of every software and dependency, as the developer analyst has mentioned. Not only that, it's also about the run. So they are talking about 3 levels of BOM. Your original BOM, your dependency, runtime BOM, and everything, right? For SBOM. Now, in that they are mentioning that you have to maintain in a particular format. So far, SPDX was there. Now industry is standardizing on Cyclone DX. So they want us to be preparing those SBOMs in a particular format. The reason for doing that is also because then your automated governance will be easier, right, when you have it in a standard format. One of the other points that MeitY is saying is every such SBOM should have a VEX document, which is a vulnerability exchange document. And then it's also should have a CSAF, which is an advisory, how to avoid that vulnerability. So we are, we have been in the compliance run to SEBI, we have done that, and similarly we are doing. Certain challenges are there because some of the suppliers that we are using are not generally in India, they are not governed by Indian regulations, so they are not yet ready in this process. That's still there, but still we are getting there, right? Now the part is also like RBI did not stop with that, only that. They added C-bomb onto it, which is cryptographic bill of material. So we are supposed to, so for example, there is IBM C-bomb kit, for example, which is an open source tool, which can work with your DevSecOps pipeline. You can embed that. It can find your cryptographic embeddings into that. Right? Now, MATI has gone a step further. So they are asking us to maintain an AI bomb, H-bomb, which is hardware bill of materials. They are also asking us to maintain Q-bomb, which is quantum bill of materials. So all of this is a new thing to DevSecOps. Not many toolings are there. We are still discovering toolings which are around this. So this is still a bill of material way of managing, discovering, and you being able to get into control is a very good thing that we are seeing from the regulatory market in India.
Thanks, Karthik. I think the list of bombs are quite huge for us to look at. Security in terms of cryptography, in terms of hardware, software, and all of it. Yeah, thanks. So I think we'll move on to looking at how does automation play a major role in addressing vulnerabilities at scale, because I think most of us do automation here, right? Without that, there's no synergy happening between what we develop and what we deploy. So if Mr. Natarajan can add some thoughts to it.
Hey, hey all. My name is Natarajan. I know this is a session right after lunch, so some of you might be busy, and I don't intend to keep it long. But just a quick show of hands, how many of you are experiencing people from the cyber teams are chasing you for vulnerability, or your team, right? Quick show of hands, please. Yeah, good. I think I could see a bunch of people raising their hands. Thanks for that. Again, this is like this hall where 2/3 are feeling that they are being chased by the cybersecurity team for any remediation, and then there's 1/3 that doesn't see cybersecurity at all, like how the hall is hiding me from your view. But in fact, now I think over the last several years, you might have started to experience that cybersecurity is becoming more and more automated. The remediation, again, is not a lot more painful like it used to be earlier, right? And that's, again, thanks to a lot of vendor-driven tools as well. A number of us would use vendor-driven tools for SCA, SAST, or DAST vulnerabilities. And again, these tools have started suggesting with some remediation steps as well, right? So of late, the general best practice in industry, and again, all that I say, you should treat that as a industry best practice and not necessarily view of my company, right? So of late, you would have come across a number of enhancements, like, for example, pipelines being set up for remediation in itself, right? So which means you will have a plain view of vulnerabilities across your software, but then you also have help coming in terms of suggested fix or even a suggested PR being raised. So that's one level of automation that I see happening across industry. And if it's not happening in your organization, I think you should talk to your leaders and then see how you can move towards that, because that reduces a lot of cycle time. And again, a frustration, takes away the frustration from the development teams, right? So that's one. And again, AI/ML. So AI/ML is all pervasive. So we have to still look at how we could make use of AI/ML. So that helps in now having pull requests raised for some of the vulnerabilities in your code. And we still believe that we are gradually maturing towards a complete automated fix, right? So, but until then, I think it might take another 3 to 5 years time in my view. But until then, I think there is a human in loop. So a PR can be automated, a pull request can be automated, but then it needs a reviewer to look at the fix and then either accept the fix or reject it or go for a manual fix, right? So we are bringing in AI/ML solutions as well as an industry best practice, right? So we're still maturing, I would say, right? So these are two main takeaways, in my opinion, that I think we should start looking at as an industry best practice.
Sure, Karthik, yeah.
See, one of the chicken and egg story in this whole thing is, like, my fellow panel is saying, the fixes actually can be automated. Right now, most of the tools are equipped with raising a pull request on your behalf with that fix. But where the problem, where the human time is being spent, is partly because of the DevSecOps maturity also. A lot of organizations, we do not have a CT coverage, continuous testing coverage. So if you are actually putting in a security remediation fix, nobody is actually confident enough to say that this will not break my functional flow, right? So that basically DevSecOps becomes an enabler even for that security fix, whereas it's also the benefactor from that particular security fix, right? So it's a chicken and egg thing. Yeah.
Nice insights. Yeah.
So on automation on the vulnerability part, I just like to share my experience. So we are just come up with a thought process called zero trust when you start adapting more on open sources, and zero tolerance where you have to adapt the regulatory things, and the last one is the most on the zero threats. So the risk factor you have to bring into the table whenever you are bringing any kind of a new requirements. It should be risk-free. So that's all equal to an zero threats, zero tolerance, and into an we brought into a zero vulnerability. So like that, we have a lot of tools in our organization. We bring, many of them are using it. They have told we use the SAST and DAST and everything to bring the visibility factor of the vulnerabilities. So holistically, what we plan to do by using an AI and using the Pythons and everything, we integrate all the silos of the vulnerabilities through the VMDRs world, and what are all the external attack surface world, and as well as what are all the cloud security postures. And whoever is today the tools they are coming up in security, they have some vulnerability which is tied up along with them. So we plan to stitch all these things together and bring into a one single class of point, so that we will able to see all the vulnerabilities at the application coding level and as well as at the infrastructure level, so that we will able to bring and adapt and remediate with the automation with the help of AI. So that is one of the pipeline which we started. So slowly we will be extending that into a larger scale. So that's where we can able to bring all the vulnerabilities under one common dashboard, and bringing that, because most of the scenarios, we know the vulnerabilities, but we don't know how to remediate. The next part is how we can easily remediate with the auto remediation part. So that's what we are working, the assigning, convert the vulnerability into an incident and convert the incident into a ticketing factor. Based on the ticketing, we have to build the remediation, auto remediation phase. So that's the whole chain of action we're planning to do.
Yeah, just want to add one point. So this is quite related to the previous question as well. So how to automate that audit? Obviously, there is a huge possibility that audit can, slow down some of our tasks, right? So yeah, automation is the key to solve that problem as well. So one interesting thing is that we have implemented in our organization is so we have an audit process that if there is any change in our network, security, firewalls, etc. So we implemented with a solution, AI solution, where it will automatically detect and alerts us and provide insights. So what has happened and who did that and what would be the impact and how to protect. So all these insights we can get from that AI tool itself, and then it will create that ticket as well. So we are solving around 80% of the time, 80 to 90% of the time and the effort that we are spending on that by this automation. So this solves the audit problem as well. Otherwise, audit requires us to manually go and review everything and document everything. So this entirely, the flow is automated. So yeah, that was entirely.
So nice insights. I think we spoke about AI, ML, and then how do we leverage human in the loop, followed by DevOps tools, DevSecOps tools that helps us, and then probably getting into incident reporting and tracking, right, to have automation responses for it. So think if anybody wants to add more points to this, feel free. Bharat, do you want to add something to this? Yeah. So I think the next question that we want to put on the floor is something that's very important. We as people who manage a lot of applications are known to use a lot of env files and then move to secrets to manage all of it, right? Now, how do we build mechanisms wherein we can strengthen secrets management and also identity access management? So some tips that we can probably throw on the floor. So probably, I think Natarajan can start.
Yeah, thanks again. So I see it this way, right? So the identity management is at the center of everything, right? And again, that is again because zero trust is again at the very epicenter of all that is security, right? So when we look at it from that perspective, that drives at least about three different factors. But again, everybody should be familiar with zero trust, I believe. So identity as in, ID comes from a root word of, from Latin. It means you or the person, right? So an entity, right? So now it's moving from identity towards an entity-based trust relationship as we bring in more and more AI agents and so on into how we work, right? So with that, again, these three factors again become pretty prominent. So the first one being this, how do we protect the secrets, right? So that's been the traditional aspect. Storing the passwords in the vault, that was the basic part so far, right? So these are like, for example, HashiCorp's vault or AWS, Secret Manager or Azure's and so on and so forth. There are multiple vendors that are providing the solution. So they have moved on from just being a storehouse of passwords towards managing them, rotating them, and again, the certificate rotation also are kind of a central part of how they manage, right? So these are one big tenet, and that still continues to exist, right? And how do we automate them? And how do we make it easier for the development teams? And how do we make it faster for them to get things done? So I think that's becoming the other epicenter of how things are being done, right? And the last of the part is, again, secrets, not just passwords, right? So it could be, again, in your Git log history, or it could be, again, lying somewhere in the comment in the code and so on and so forth. So having a strong lineup of tools, right? There are quite a lot of open source tools like TuffleHog or Git leaks. Each of them has its own, advantages. One is fast, the other is slow. One has an entropy-based detection of secrets. The other goes by the regex way, the traditional way of. So there are plurality of tools that are available, right? So, and again, how are these tools going to help us and enable us to cater to the modern development with AI agents? So these are as well other perspectives that one needs to look at, right? And again, it's all these three pieces together make up the significant part of secrets and secret management. And DevSecOps definitely is a big enabler for this, right? In addition to the tool and building the ecosystem. And the whole thing is again centered around making it easier for a developer. How do we make it easier for a developer? How do we make it faster for them to develop a product and deploy, right?
So thanks, nice insights on tools such as AWS Secrets and HashiCorp. So Narayanan, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, sure. I think Natarajan has covered most of it, but probably I would probably just say this: like whenever I see passwords hard-coded on source code, I just remember this comedy, like in the movie, a family basically when they go out on a trip, they put it on a social media saying we are going out so and so date, and we'll come back probably in a day. And then when they come back and see the whole house is empty. So that's kind of a thing, having a password on your code. So obviously, tools like Git leak, Git secrets, there are multiple tools over there. So which prevents the password being pushed into the code, into the repository. So and having role-based access rather than having an individual access is something that can be looked at. And also there are multiple things now we have in the place, like which we didn't have decades back, like short-lived access, shorter duration of access enabled for a particular roles. So that is something quite effective. And having a regular auditing and monitoring to, look at the privileges, and detect anomalies, and then, be proactive to ensure that we, implement security.
Nice.
Credentials, yeah.
Nice. Thanks for sharing those techniques. So I think we'll move on to the next question, wherein we would like to understand how do organizations manage potential conflicts between application developers and infrastructure security policies. This is something that's problem to deal with both sides, right? So how do we solve this? Any insights?
Yeah, I'll take this up. I think honestly, it's just like asking what matters most, right? Whether it's heart or your brain. I would say both are important, right? They have their own functions to do. For example, if you talk about infrastructure security, right? It's just like these guys are like hard circulating the bits across your environment, make it stable, up and running. And same thing with application security guys, right? They helps in protecting the design, protecting the code, and stuff like that, right? Both are important, whether you do SAST or whether you do server level scanning or whatever. But where comes the conflict, right? They have their own duties to perform, right? For example, if you talk about application side, they believe in innovation and speed and stuff like that. They got to satisfy customers' requirement, so they go with speed and innovation. Other side, infrastructure side, if you talk about they want to have a stable environment, controlled environment, and patching and so on. This is where the typical conflict comes in, right? I've been hearing in day-to-day operations world where application team says, let's do the release today. Another side, infrastructure team says, let's patch the application first, right? This kind of discussion keeps happening. So you got to have a balance between both. That's very important, right? And so three things I would probably like to highlight here, because I think security is everyone's business, and it's not about infrastructure or application, everyone's business. So first, and of course, we have this DevSecOps, which keeps the security up and running from this design itself. That's very good. It starts from the scratch, so that gets maintained. So every code gets in, that gets tested. Second one is, people should work for not for the roles. I would say roles are very important, whether you do infrastructure, whether you do application. But I think you got to see the risk point of view, take a collective decision and work on the risk being assigned as an organization as a whole, and work on that agenda. That's very important, so that more collaboration comes in. And the third one is actually, of course, speak the same language, right? So you might have your own KRAs to do from application side, and same with infrastructure. I think you speak the same language, which is the risk language, I would say. I think if you get into that, learn the basic of risk, what needs to be addressed, I think that most of the item gets resolved. So an overall, probably a layered defense security approach should be formed, starting with perimeter level security, where you try to patch in the firewalls and routers and switches and stuff like that. And second one is your application and database layer, where you do the SAST and DAST and all the stuff. The third one is a server level. You keep your patches up and running. So if you have this clean with proper process and proper methodology, I think that potentially would resolve the conflicts, I would say. Yeah. That's my take.
Thanks, Bharathkumar.
So I'd like to give a quick viewpoint on this. My fellow panelists told that the protocol they have to understand. So it's more in the InfoSec side, we take a standpoint that is more on the collaboration and the communication. So these two things which we keep constantly approaching the infrastructure side and as well as the application side. So both the side where they build the things from the infrastructure side, from the application side they build and run the things. So overall we bring the framework called EB, or engineering, build and run. So even the engineering team are a build time or run, where InfoSec will be there to guide them and more collaboratively work on what is the risk on your side, we need to keep highlighting them. So what is the risk on the application side, we need to keep informing them. So it's more where you have to do the collaborative way to approach and make the things happen, rather than pinpointing and making them on the risk side of the side. More on threatening way, it will not never work out. More on the collaborative way, where we can make them understand, and they will also take the ownership of it. The responsibility and ownership will play a major role to addressing any point of vulnerabilities. Because it's not that vulnerability today I am addressing, tomorrow the same kind of a coding pattern, same kind of a stack I'll build for some other application. If it is repeating again, what is the lesson learned? Will not be a valid one. So again, go back to the square one. So what is the effort has been done will not be get capitalized. So to address that point, collaborative and the communication will be a clear statement.
Thanks, Saravanakumar. So Karthik, you want to add something?
Yeah. See, generally, when it comes to infra vulnerabilities and application vulnerabilities, right? These are usually in most of the organization different teams addressing this. There's an infra group who addresses the infra vulnerabilities. Application teams generally, get the backlog of application vulnerabilities. Right? But where the interesting part comes is there's something called as reachability or exploitability, right? So now, previously we were concentrating on CVE scores. Now we are talking about exploitability scores, right? This is basically how this can be exploited. A vulnerability can be exploited, right? This goes several times up if your infra is not good, right? If you have holes in your firewalls or whatever it is, or if your micro-segmentation is not proper, the explorability is becoming more, right? Now, a lot of these runtime scanning tools have matured this capability of telling you whether this code vulnerability is reachable. Now that actually helps you prioritize something between, which is actually a combination of an infra vulnerability plus the application to be more higher than this. So this also can be done through your vulnerability cataloging tools as well, where they all, for example, if you are actually providing all your vulnerability feed into a certain tool, then this ranking can be provided by the tool as well. So this is something which is evolving now. I think we are headed in the right direction.
Nice points, Karthik. So I think that point on understanding from where the vulnerability is sourcing, whether it's infra or the application side, that's quite important. And collaboration and owning security as people together is something that's very important. So Krista, do you want to add some points to this?
No, mostly it is covered. I think the crux of this question is the formation of DevSecOps itself, right? We used to be different teams for the Dev and Ops and the security. And, the very purpose of forming in one, not just to be co-locating together, but to have a common goal of instead of I think the futuristic or the philosophical one is being even the KPIs should not be different. Let's say there's a KPI for development, KPI for the second, the KPI for ops. And there needs to be a one KPI which is common, so that they share their goal and they share their challenges as well, right? So I think that is the direction that we looked at.
Good point, sir. Thanks. I think KRI is important where it is shared between us, right? Yeah. So I think as we probably head towards the end of the discussion, I think something that's very important for all of us to understand is how do we build a method wherein we have a culture of shared security as an ownership that's across all the teams, like in engineering, infrastructure, and everybody, right? So probably I'll take a minute probably to understand from each of you on a couple of points that you think is important, or even one point would do where you give us something where you have experienced it in your organization, you have come up with a method to counter it, right? So if we can probably start with Natarajan sir. Like how do we basically build a culture of shared security ownership?
I'll just take this, and so it's just a continuation of the previous question. Like, I think the security cannot be looked at in isolation, right? This has to be a common, and in fact, I would even, propose the security. There should not be even a separate security team. I mean, looks impractical, though. I'm just saying, in a way that security should be a responsibility for everybody in that sense, right? Even to a level, in fact, I've even discussed in various leadership forums, right? Even a security assessment should be part of even a hiring, right? To that level, like the way we talked about development cycle, wherein security starts from the zero, from the design phase, right? Even for an employee, right? Security should start from the very beginning. Right. It cannot be looked at a bolt-on. You just add, I just gone to 1 or 2 trainings in a year. No, that's not enough for the kind of dynamic environments that we are in today, right? So in that perspective, it is a common goal, and the phishing awarenesses and other things are very frequent. I think one of my friend was talking about in their organization. The minute the phishing awareness email was sent, in less than 22 seconds, the employee actually submitted the data. I'm not just talking about open up the email, and I'm not talking about clicking the links, right? They even submitted the data, and it's not one of the case, right? So that is on one side. And the other side, if you look at, very interesting case, like there is about almost 60% of the employees not even open the mail, right? Whether you want to consider that they are extremely educated, that they know this is a phishing attempt, they have not opened it, or some filter somewhere, helping, or they may be reluctant, right? So I think it's a holistic problem, and again, like you mentioned, security is like a bits and pieces of like everyday stuff and all, right? Going forward, I think with these agentic AIs and AML sort of things, right? There are a lot of opportunities in terms of kind of co-pilot, not the branding that Microsoft talking about, in terms of the development or whatever. There must be an agent working along with every employee, and every phase of it, there are, I think one of my panelists were also talking about, right? So the policy as code, compliance as code, regulations as code, right? So it is like there is a virtual co-pilot for every employee, right? So in the process that it actually detects that there is a probable problems or the compliance issues or the PI, PHI or whatever, regulatory or whatever, so it actually triggers there, right? The cost of identifying these problems at a later stage is very, very high for any organizations, right? I think one is leveraging these automation frameworks or the dynamic technologies like ANML. Other side is, of course, the culture of not considering them as a kind of overhead or the speed breaks. Rather, it's part of the, I think the business that, right? Yeah, so.
Thank you, Chris, yeah.
I think the question is about how to raise the awareness, right? How to raise the bar and embed security. I think, of course, we have these trainings and roadshows and stuff like that. I would be very straight, right? Unless and until if you embed the security in the KRA's metrics, I think that's going to work out effectively. Everyone's, in every goal, security should be part of it. Whether you're part of any team, part of technology or part of infrastructure, security should be part of the goal. Actually, it should be measured as part of the metrics. So because if any security incident happens, right, it's not cyber's responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility, right? So it should be a collaborative thing, which is what I keep saying, collaboration, right? So security should be part of everyone's goal, rather than it's one team's goal. So I think the measurement should be spread across each and every team, starting from the trainee joining the organization till the senior most person in the organization. Yeah, that's what my take is all about. Yeah.
Thanks, Bharat.
Yeah. So yeah, as we were talking about the culture, right? So people's first in that. So what I'm thinking is like, so each function or each sprint team can have a specific security champion, right? So we can try to build that kind of culture so that the security aspect will spread across the entire organization. So we can try that way. And we can do a lot of security gamification, right? So gamification on the security, identifying the risks or identifying the vulnerabilities. So those kind of stuffs that we can try. And as my peers mentioned, the shared KPI. So that's very important. So that should be owned by all the corresponding stakeholders, not just by one team. Security is a shared responsibility, right, in general, yeah.
Actually, this one question you should be keep cautious when you are having a security expert in the stage. They will come up with the banging and all the terminologies and the gyans about the security. Just one line I just finished in a couple of minutes before. I like to say, it's a complete pin drop silence in the room for the last 60 minutes. To give them a crux, security, don't treat security as a sideline, treat it as your lifeline.
Thanks, Saravanakumar sir. So, yeah. You want to add something, Karthik?
Yes.
Yeah.
See, a lot of you know, so the topic is about DevOps.
Absolutely.
Now, DevOps, more than technology, is also a culture, right? So when DevOps first came in, everyone was wondering, how will I do daily builds? Because nobody was used to that, right? Now that's a culture change. If you have to bring DevOps properly, you will need your requirements teams in one room, your infra teams in one room. So they're talking about agile pods and all those things, right? This is a cultural change which enables DevOps. Now, if you see traditional DevOps measures, we talk about DORA metrics. DORA metrics is how you measure the successful DevOps, right? But do you have a measure for security in DevSecOps? You don't have it, right? Yeah. A mean time to fix for a particular security vulnerability is not there. So usually when you start a project, your leader will probably ask about ROI for a project. ROI is either it is increasing the top line for the company or probably it is securing the bottom line, right?
Correct.
But do you also factor in the security and compliance as
risk is something that's going to, right?
So the ROI statement itself should include that, security and compliance as one of this. Plus your DORA or your DevSecOps should have metrics around mean time to fix for a security vulnerability. And then the other culture change that's required is security is seen as a checker function. Now, generally, a developer may not have answers to every security vulnerability. So it's a collaborative effort where the security also brings in certain expertise from their side. The developer also brings something, and then they collaborate and then fix something for the organization, right? So the cultural change is probably what is required to drive this particular collective ownership kind of a thing, right? So that's what I want to drive. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Karthik. So I think it's been a good hour of discussion with all of you, where you've been sharing all possible knowledge on various areas, like whatever you have learned from your past, and something that's very trending in the industry, and what we'll have to also look at state of art. So I think it was very interactive, and thanks for all the knowledge. I hope the crowd would have also learned a lot of things from this session.